Night in the great harbor of Syracuse rarely arrives quietly, but on the first evening of Rome's siege, the darkness settled like a lid on a kettle ready to boil. Lanterns aboard 200 Roman quinqueremes winked in wavering rows, their reflections trembling on water that smelled of pitch and brine. From the cliffs of Ortygia Island came an answering chorus, the click of torsion springs being tested, the clatter of counterweights wound back, the low growl of Syracusan oarsmen edging triremes into shadowed coves. Somewhere among those defensive ramparts, an old man in a simple woolen cloak stooped over a tray of damp sand, drawing curves with a finger stained by soot and bronze filings. Geometry, to him, was a living language, and tonight it spoke of arcs that would hurl stones farther than any Roman engineer imagined possible. Yet, if he raised his eyes, he would have seen the horizon thick with silhouettes of legion-filled transport ships, iron intent advancing behind sails dyed imperial red. The moment had come when pure thought would be weighed against siegecraft, when a city famous for poetry and commerce would stake its future on the restless genius of Archimedes. You know the broad strokes, catapults, mirrors, and, finally, betrayal. But the true tension lies in what neither side dared admit, that this isolated struggle would tip the balance of the entire Second Punic War. Keep listening, because the tale of Syracuse is more than an eccentric mathematician flinging fire. It is the slow burn contest between improvisation and perseverance, between the sparkle of invention and the grind of empire. And its lessons still ripple through every innovation-obsessed battlefield today. Syracuse in 215 BC was a city of contradictions wrapped in a peninsula shaped like a dolphin's tail. Its limestone bastions gleamed white at noon. Yet inside those walls, politics turned as dark as the wine served in the agora's colonnades. King Hero II had kept Rome at bay for half a century by paying tribute and shipping grain. But the moment news arrived that Hannibal had annihilated Roman armies at Trasimene and Cannae, the 80-something monarch sensed Rome's aura of invincibility flicker. His grandson Hieronymus, young, impulsive, and flattered by Carthaginian promises, needed little prodding to tilt Syracuse away from its treaty obligations. When Hero died in 215 BC, the 20-year-old heir invited Punic envoys to banquets, decorated his court in Tyrian purple, and openly bragged that Hannibal will dictate terms in the forum before I reach my prime. He was wrong. A palace conspiracy carved him down with daggers after a reign of barely 13 months. But the damage was done. Pro-Punic and pro-Roman factions convulsed the city. Carthage slipped warships into the harbor. Rome dispatched ambassadors who found the atmosphere so volatile they feared for their lives. By 214 BC, the Roman Senate judged negotiation hopeless. Consul Marcus Claudius Marcellus, already a legend for storming Gaulish cities, received command of 2 veteran legions and a fleet tasked with bringing Syracuse back to heel, quickly, before Hannibal could exploit the island as a forward base. Marcellus understood siegecraft. He also understood that conventional escalade against Syracuse's walls would waste men he could not spare. The city's landward defenses straddled the plateau of Epipolae and funneled attackers uphill through choke points pre-sighted by archers. Its seaward walls crowned sheer cliffs, and in both harbors, chains hung ready to be raised against enemy bowsprits. Worst of all, every scout report repeated the same unnerving detail. Archimedes himself supervised the artillery emplacements. The mathematician was hardly new to military commissions. He had designed Hero's massive grain ships and a screw pump capable of draining flooded mines. But legend now credited him with torsion catapults, calibrated to within finger-width tolerances, and cranes able to pluck ships clear of the water. Marcellus's own engineers scoffed until they rounded Plemmyrian headland at dawn and met a thunderclap of missiles so thick they darkened the sky. Great stones, some the size of oxen, came whistling down on decks. Bolts, as long as masts, punched straight through rampart screens. Hauled cables snapped with a crack like breaking bones. Roman pilots hauled on tillers in panic as hulls shattered, shedding oars and men in frothing wakes. Marcellus drew his fleet back out of range, but not before he saw what looked like yardarms atop the walls pivoting with eerie coordination. Only later would prisoners explain the secret. Archimedes had built compound catapults with interchangeable arms, each set to a specific range. Spotters measured the distance of incoming hulls against stakes driven on the shoreline. Crews then fitted the appropriate arms, loosed, swapped them out, and loosed again, maintaining a murderous staccato. Stung, yet undeterred, the consul tried the landward assault. Under a moonless sky, his troops scaled the lesser wall by ladders stacked 3 high and secured a postern tower. At sunrise, cohorts swarmed along the parapet, shields locked, pila poised to sweep defenders from crenellations. But Archimedes had foreseen the possibility. Hidden along the inner faces of certain towers were hinged panels that dropped at the pull of a rope, revealing apertures through which compact stone throwers could fire point-blank. Roman lines erupted as fist-sized rocks hammered helmets and snapped collarbones. In the chaos, Syracusan hoplites countercharged and hurled the intruders back over the brink. Down below, legionaries who had crowded at the base were crushed under their own falling ladders. Marcellus spent the afternoon collecting wounded and calculating alternatives. That night, while pacing between tent poles, he admitted to a tribune, "We fight not men, but the workshop of Vulcan himself." For 2 months, the pattern repeated. Whenever Roman engineers rolled siege towers forward, pivoting beams, crude predecessors to the later claw of Archimedes, would hook the tower balconies, jerk them skyward, then drop them in splintered heaps. Whenever sappers tunneled, countershafts broke through and belched smoke, igniting pitch-soaked straw. Even the harbor saw new horrors. Stories spread of mirrors flashing noon sunlight into concentrated beams that set Roman sails aflame. Modern historians debate that tale, but the psychological effect was real. Sailors swore they felt heat on their cheeks before missiles ever struck. Marcellus ordered bronze helmets polished dull to avoid catching the alleged deathlight, yet each glimmer on water triggered fresh waves of terror. Some captains went so far as to drape nets over their decks, praying the mesh would tangle any descending iron claws. By autumn, Marcellus accepted that brute force would not crack Syracuse while its genius-laced defenses hummed intact. He shifted to strangulation. The fleet sealed both harbors. Patrols cut grain convoys from Africa. Cavalry scoured Sicilian farms to deny the city external forage. Inside the walls, ration lines lengthened, and oligarchs who once dined on mullet, baked in saffron, found themselves chewing barley crusts. Even so, morale held. Children darted through agora arcades singing ditties about old Archie's thunder, and each new Roman setback became a street festival. As winter rains flooded siege trenches, plague nibbled at legionary camps, while Syracuse's cisterns, designed by predecessors in an earlier siege, kept fountains gurgling clear. Marcellus's patience thinned. He could not afford a protracted blockade while Hannibal prowled Italy. He needed a breach, a spy, a stroke of chance. In 218 to 13 BC, he received all three. A Spanish mercenary captain named Moriscus slipped through the lines offering intelligence. He claimed a section of wall near the hexapylon was undermanned during certain religious observances when night-long rituals in the upper city drew defenders away. In exchange for gold and Roman citizenship, he promised to guide a storming party through a dry aqueduct that opened behind that wall. Marcellus gambled. On a moon-shadowed night, his picked cohorts crawled through the stinking tunnel, emerged beneath a stone lintel, and overwhelmed the sleepy watch. At dawn, crimson banners rippled atop the outer rampart. The upper city of Euryalus remained in Syracusan hands, but panic rippled. Archimedes raced to shift engines, but hauling machines across steep streets took time. Marcellus pressed, capturing district after district in brutal house-to-house fighting that left mosaics slick with blood. Yet the assault stalled at the inner wall. Archimedes' machines, now firing at near-vertical plunging angles, turned streets into killing lanes. When a fresh Roman cohort hammered at an iron-reinforced gate, the defenders hurled down a massive wooden spar precisely weighted to splinter the door and the men battering it. This was no ad hoc defense. It was mathematics applied to slaughter. Months dragged on. Roman successes shrank to inches. Syracusan larders dwindled to ounces. Carthage attempted a relief fleet under Admiral Bomilcar, but shifting winds drove his triremes back to Africa. A second attempt did penetrate the harbor long enough to land grain. Yet Marcellus's blockade tightened again, and Bomilcar, unwilling to challenge Roman rams head-on, withdrew. Inside the city, factions turned on one another. Some argued for breakout, others for negotiation. A few plotted quiet surrender to Rome if guarantees could be secured. In the confusion, an exile named Thoas bribed sentries at the seaport gate and admitted a Roman patrol. But the coup failed when a night watchman raised an alarm, and Archimedes directed a flood of quick-fire ballista shots that shredded the infiltrators like wheat. The reprisal executions further thinned Syracuse's officer corps. By the summer of 212 BC, the siege entered its attrition phase. Marcellus had new engines of his own, rams mounted on floating platforms, shielded by vinia roofs layered in fire-resistant alum. They crept forward, battering at seawalls, while catapults on nearby barges launched suppressing volleys. Archimedes answered by recalibrating his older machines, converting long-range hurlers into short-range bombards that skipped stones along the water's surface, billiard shots striking hulls at the waterline. The Romans countered by draping hides over hulls and fletching stones with straw to minimize skip. Step met counterstep in a technological dance seldom seen again until Renaissance artillery duels. Yet hunger works changes that machinery cannot. Bread rations in Syracuse fell to 1/2 loaf per soldier, then to a fist-sized pinch per civilian. Oxen disappeared from streets, then dogs, then stray cats. Marcellus, learning of the desperation, intensified psychological warfare. Siege engines lobbed severed heads of captured sailors over the walls, each noggin tagged with parchment listing the day's Roman victories elsewhere against Carthage. The endgame broke one moonless night when a small Roman scouting party, feeling along the North Sea wall, discovered a neglected postern gate left ajar to cool grain in the heat. They captured the guards in silence, then lit a beacon whose red pulse signaled Marcellus to release pre-positioned boats packed with legionaries. 1,000 men slipped inside, followed by 1,000 more fanning into the Tycha district, where all of Archimedes' artillery faced outward. By dawn, the invaders had secured granaries and lowered the Carthaginian ensign. Marcellus entered through the gate of Arethusa on horseback, ordering his troops to spare civilians and, above all, to locate Archimedes alive, for no other prize in Sicily equals his mind. But urban combat takes on a logic of its own. Skirmishes erupted in narrow lanes. Oil lamps toppled, igniting warehouses. Looters pried ivory inlays from temple doors. Amid the chaos, a Roman legionary burst into a courtyard where an elderly man bent over a circle scratched in dust. "Do not disturb my diagrams," Archimedes allegedly muttered without looking up. The soldier, nerves ragged from hours of street fighting, struck him down. When Marcellus heard, he is said to have wept, calling the event a defeat worse than any my legions ever suffered. Rome plundered Syracuse systematically, but preserved many of Archimedes' instruments. Marcellus sent the famed planetarium, a geared model of lunar and solar cycles, home as a gift to the Senate. Yet thousands of scrolls burned, and the city that had once rivaled Athens as a beacon of learning became less a capital than a provincial way station. Strategically, the fall of Syracuse sealed Sicily for Rome, denied Hannibal a critical bridgehead, and reopened grain supplies that would feed armies pressing him on the Italian mainland. Symbolically, it proclaimed that not even brilliance embodied in a single mind could indefinitely withstand the logistical patience of an imperial republic. History often sums up the siege in footnotes of novelty weapons, but strip away the spectacle and a deeper lesson emerges. Innovation dazzles, discipline endures. Archimedes bought his city 2 extra years against the mightiest military machine of his age, a testament to what one intellect can accomplish with wood, bronze, and imagination. Yet Rome's adaptive persistence turned each setback into a blueprint for adjustment, each defeat into rehearsal. The dialectic between the two, spark and grind, flash and march, echoes in every arms race since. If you felt the pulse of catapults in your chest, if you smelled tar-soaked ropes and heard the rasp of chalk on slate as Archimedes plotted trajectories that would redraw horizons, then do not let this moment stay siloed in the past. Share this story with a friend who thinks equations end at the classroom door. Show them numbers once guarded walls and felled empires. Subscribe and strike the notification bell so you never miss our weekly expeditions into battles where brains dueled as fiercely as blades. Then head to the comments and vote on which clash of strategy and science you want explored next. Maybe the rocket barrages at Kai Fung, the code breakers at Bletchley Park, or the drone swarms shaping tomorrow's skies. Because the frontier where ideas meet force is forever moving, and together we will follow its line wherever it redraws the map.